Thank you. Yeah, so thank you. I almost rebranded this title based upon the prior talk in terms of Tale of Two Galaxies, do something like a journey through the history of time, or maybe even a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But I'll defer on that and come forward. What I want to do, and for those who are data and go in, we already are 8% of my slides in. The bad news is I've got a lot of builds, and so there's a lot of content on the slides. I'll go through, but really what I want to do in this first talk was introduce me a little bit, so you know where I come from, sort of both from my skills, from my career. Talk about IBRI, where we're trying to change how we do some things in translational, and this organization is definitely a key part that integrates with IBRI. Talk a little bit about what we're doing, how we're trying to drive this innovation, and then talk a little bit about what's going to happen just a little bit north of us. So it's going to be really high level. I'm going to go relatively quick, and then my hope is that I can come back and delve into topics a little more deeper as we go. So quick thing about me, as Sean had introduced me, I do have a PhD in physical chemistry. I did teach in labs, but almost always was doing computational research in terms of there. I then went to the Naval Research Lab, did simulations there on supercomputers of what we call chemically sustained shock waves and energetic materials, which is basically detonations and explosives, but a great way to sort of talk about it. Got my skills in terms of Unix and simulations and working on big iron in terms of doing that. Then moved on and came here to IBRI in Department of Chemistry and ran NIH-funded molecular modeling lab. We actually did do some GABA modeling of the ion channels at that point in time, of structure-based ones to connect in. I did a quick foray into doing a co-founder of a startup into coupons at the time, right before everything tanked, and just not the right time. I also did a quick foray when Michael Mughrabi came, where I was a lead developer in VR systems, again, maybe a little bit ahead of my time in terms of where we were. In terms that I had the opportunity to go to Eli Lilly in 2000, starting as an individual contributor, computational chemistry, cheminformatics, doing predictive modeling, moving up to structural biology, and ultimately leading the research IT organization globally. And then I went on loan to IBRI to help them get started in data analytics side, and then became permanent there mid last year. So key question, does anyone know what a T-shaped individual is? Okay. This is a term that comes from HR, Google used it or otherwise, and I think that will help explain sort of me a little bit, and I'll do another quick thing. So a T-shaped individual is someone who can go really deep in science and technology, but they also have the broadness to move across either the soft skills, the knowledge, the ability to move across a lot of different both areas or not. I've always found in my career that taking something that worked well in one area, translate into other, makes a difference. So let me continue moving on a little bit here, and just pulling up. I do have quite a bit of publications across a lot of different areas. I went to the Naval Research Lab to do and I clipped it just to show the detonations at nanometer resolution using molecular dynamics. That didn't actually lead to my top paper. My top paper actually is the energetics of nanotubules, carbon nanotubes. I actually was there at the right time when I could actually do some critical work in terms of that I showed on the other slide. Also have done stuff in docking that we did at Lilly, variety of other things relative to oral drugs, and continuing to understand. Now, if you look at my top, I also did a video clip actually long ago that was in the BBC Horizon series. But a quick note for those who like data, you sort of look at my top two publications and say, wow, that's really interesting. You know, if you just use single metrics of number of citations, both of them look, you know, you definitely have one above the other. But if you start looking at how they are progressing over time, one has plateaued. Still surprisingly after 30 years, getting 30 plus citations a year. Another one, and I still don't know why, I haven't looked into it, is actually seeing a lot more citations recently in terms of the docking. Probably means that we have a lot more crystal structures available that people are doing, and so they're going back and using these these methodologies to solve new type things going forward. So coming forward on this, this was what I was actually told a long time ago in a summer research program, that someday I'd get serious about research. I hope you'd see that I am serious about research, but I'm serious about doing it a different way. That's the lead in terms of where we want to go. For those counting, 20% done, let's talk on IBRI. IBRI was really initiated by a report that said, with all the great life sciences companies that we have, with the great academic institutions, with Regenstrief, all of the substrate we have here, somehow it doesn't seem like we're capturing the talent, we're capturing the research funds that we should be able to do here in Indiana with all of the talent we have. So IBRI was started with a goal to bridge between academic institutions, even small tech, I'd hope to say in terms of this, and industry to really drive translational into different ways. And so our goal is to really be that bridge between a lot of the different capabilities. And I sort of feel with my career, I've been in government labs, I've been in the academics and trying to work with industry. I've been in industry trying to work with academics and small tech. I've got those experiences, and so how can we do things that really drive things forward? Now, like with anyone, you have to have a mission. So our mission really is industry inspired, applied, in cardiometabolic disease, diabetes, metabolic disease, poor nutrition. That's because of the state. We want to build a world-class organization that catalyzes activities across Indiana and beyond. Scientific excellence, it starts with quality, entrepreneurial, how do you translate it, and then collaborative nature. So how do we do this and why are we unique? We really want to catalyze the activities. We don't have to do everything, but if we can catalyze and be the piece that can get things going, then we can make a difference. We collaborate. We don't have to own everything. We need to work in a networked way in the ecosystem and build that. We need to complement. We don't need to reproduce or redo things that are here. Don't need to be competitive. Right? We've got a lot of talent here. How do we align it to value, things of value? And we can convene people together, have people come together. A lot of big science, a lot of the challenges we're facing, as was just talked about in the prior talk, needs large teams and large players to do it, each of them playing their roles well. And then ultimately, sometimes it's just about connecting people together. So we are just still relatively new. We've gone from roughly 3 years ago, one to four people. We were at about 22 at the start of the year. We're now at about 37, so we're continuing to grow. What are the areas of focus? I handle the applied data sciences. We've got Teresa Mastracci, who's also connected with IU. She's handling regenerative medicine, looking at really interesting pathways for type 1 diabetes using both human tissue, mouse models, and zebrafish. Mike Puja is doing single cell. How can you do rare cells down to very low levels? Think liquid biopsies in terms of that. And the most recent individual is now Vedati Yusupov, who's coming with a biological side. Because lots of times if you understand disease biology, if you understand it through the data analytics side and you identify new targets, sometimes the best way to go is through a biologic. And so just to make this also current, because we are doing a couple changes, it was just actually announced a week or so ago, okay, maybe a couple weeks ago, Lilly's new Diabetes Center of Excellence at IBRI. This is joint between Eli Lilly, IU School of Medicine, and IBRI to really recruit nationally recognized talent in diabetes, bring them, some of them are actually bringing them back to IU. They actually were trained in IU School of Medicine, bring them back and place them in IBRI's labs with the staff and drive them forward. And Lily's interest, because now you brought talent closer. They don't have to go across the nation. IU, it helps build the capabilities and diabetes research center there. And again, is a key part of how do we grow the ecosystem. So moving on, let me talk a little bit about what I've been doing for the past a lot of time. So one of the early things we recognized that was recognized in the Patel is that really Indiana is unique. What we have with life sciences companies as well as the universities is unique. We have almost one of everything. In fact, when BioCrossroads was working on this, we are number 2 in life sciences exports in the nation, second only to California. And we have a base of 6 million people as opposed to 33 million. So on a per capita, we are number 1 in life science. Why? Because we have Eli Lilly in therapeutics. We have Roche Diagnostics. We have Cook Medical, the largest medical devices here. We have the ortho side that is up there. We have Dow Agro that now is part of Corteva, Dow DuPont. And then you look across there in terms of the largest school of medicine. We've got a variety of those other things coming forward. So the key questions for me really around 2016 was, well, how are we going to meet the vision of IBRI? How do we operate? What makes us different? How can we compete? Especially because I was brought in for big data, data analytics, all these type things, and how am I going to compete with a Google or an Apple or otherwise? And so that's what I hope to show you, is that how we are starting to break through some of those issues and solve problems in ways that are a little bit different going forward. So this goes back to really coming on now 3 years ago. I came into IBRI, I talked with a lot of the scientific advisory board across a lot of different disciplines, did a lot of work, and I said, aspirationally, this is what IBRI wants to do in terms of really identify substrate for life sciences partners in new therapeutics, diagnostics, devices, nutrition, and wellness programs. We don't have to do everything, but how do we catalyze and help them accelerate those efforts? So originally said, yes, we could probably do that if we could start understanding the data, getting access, integrating, and learning from that data. The challenge is if you're in cardiometabolic disease, which is almost more of a syndrome than a specific disease when you get to type 2 diabetes, how are you going to do it? Because it is related to your genetics. It is related to how your biology works as you go from the translational down to it, but it's related on where we live. What are our risk factors? What are the behaviors? What do we do individually? So it became very clear we had to actually start integrating across research data, clinical data, socioeconomic data, and personal data. Now, we're not the only ones. I've been inspired by others or other ones. One of the ones looking at the creative destruction of medicine is Eric Topol, looking again at how do you look at all of the different types of data that you need to go to really understand a holistic view of health, especially in an area where there's huge behavioral components or environmental factors. So moving on that, we've sort of came back and did a quadrant view. I'm now simplifying this, but the goal I set up was, could we actually start identifying and leveraging Indiana as a way to integrate across those? And so coming back to sort of just refresh, we have IBRI that has a unique environment where expertise is in reach. Even this organization or School of Medicine, right? Wiggins Reef with its history of electronic medical records, Indiana with its history of insulin and diagnostics with the Unimeter. So we have the expertise here in terms of this. We're tasked with a very difficult and very broad one. And so it's how do we understand metabolic health in a different way? We need to integrate across a lot of different data sets. And for any of you doing data analytics, it's always 80% of your time is spent in cleaning the data, getting it ready for analysis. In fact, I sat at Lilly in an auditorium one time, sitting next to someone, and he said, Dan, I'm doing something wrong. I said, I'm trying to solve this problem. I've got all this various data. and it's just taken me forever to do that. I said, sounds like you're doing something right. Because most of your time is doing that. So we can break some of that and transfer across. And so the challenge for me at the time was to prove that IBRI could actually become a collaboration hub, innovation across there, the various things, leveraging regional resources and moving forward. So just to reiterate again, in terms here and move forward, this was the problem and what we're trying to do in terms of bridging the gap. Where are we? And I'm going to sort of tell you a little bit about the end story and then fill in and then come back. But if you look at the problems that we've been working on solving, what are the obesity rates statewide? One of my first projects I'll talk about a little bit. Can we understand human environmental toxicity? Lilly generates compounds that are go into humans directly. Dow Agro does compounds that go into the environment that we ingest. Can we better understand, which is one of my largest projects with Regenstrief and Eli Lilly and Roche, can we better understand type 2 diabetes through electronic health records? Can we move from subjective to objective disease measures using something like digital biomarkers, predictive modeling? Can you predict the chance? Now, to do these things, to show the complexity of the problem, and I'll redo this, is really about 8 projects or collaborations we have ongoing, roughly 4 industrial sponsors or state sponsors that we do, 6 partners, more than 40 agreements in terms of doing. So it's not always just a technical problem. We're breaking down organizational and bureaucratic barriers to be able to do that. So we think that we can be the place to drive some of these problems going forward. So continuing on, I sort of talked about this as I was coming into the environment and understanding what we had. I was talking with the state, the Management Performance Hub, IHI, talking with Jen Walthall, who's now moved from the State Department of Health to FSSA, and they had nothing going on in KPIs at that point for the state in terms of what they wanted to improve. It's changed a little bit now, infant mortality, smoking cessation, and obesity. And they had programs going on 2 of those, not something going on the 3rd. I said, great, it aligns to our strategy and our mission. Let's see what we can do. So we grabbed data from a variety of different sources, integrated them together, actually found some things in IHI, and which would then replicate in INPC, where we were not capturing some of the data from EHRs or EMRs. And now, of course, Wiggins Reef has the ability to go directly into EMRs in terms of doing that. But now it allowed us to actually push Indiana and the state and our policies in terms of saying, how do we better set up the data for understanding our human health care and our citizens' health in terms of here, and do it from an evidence-based, data-driven way. This really led, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, about type 2 diabetes project. I'll go into a little more detail in that, so I won't belabor this point here. The other project that we have going on in predicting human toxicity, we've now had this has been going on probably ultimately be a 2-year project, basically a 9-month pilot phase where we generated a website to pull the bioinformatics capabilities together. We actually showed this at SOT, and we've taken the best capabilities from Eli Lilly, Dow, put them together into a system so that others can use it. So it's actually taking a reverse from industry, giving back to academics, and our plan is to open source it, make it available, and hopefully drive research better there. And this is actually a finalist in the Agro, which is their industry group, Agro 2018 Awards for the best industry collaboration. So November, we may know if we've won in that. That website is out there available. If you go to ctox.indianabiosciences.org. The other one we are doing now is digital biomarkers. We actually have done work inspired by Eli Lilly to can we collect subjective or objective data differently when we primarily use patient-reported outcomes using devices. I've actually got one I'm exploring here, digital device. I've got one on here, which is an Empatica E4. Can we start understanding those and use those signatures? Lots of challenges in terms of doing that because it's variable in terms of human, it's variable in terms of compliance, it's variable in terms of the quality of the data coming back. So I think there's lots of challenges before we actually go from digital captured data to truly digital biomarkers. Hasn't stopped tech from sort of doing a lot of work in there. Sorry, we are competing as well in the Inject Tech Challenge. Congratulations to Josh Vest as being one of the finalists. This project is actually one of the finalists as well. So we'll know next week maybe in terms of where we are. But I think both, as I've seen both of the projects and everything, doesn't really matter. We're still continuing to drive innovation here. So let me talk a little bit more. This was inspired by work that was done at Mount Sinai in terms of looking at healthcare data and trying to understand the complexity of type 2 diabetes and how its comorbidities and or the complications of type 2 diabetes when uncontrolled really exhibit. And in fact, there's most recently been another paper that comes out that says we've usually talked about type 2 diabetes as one type. Now they're coming back and saying there's multiple, and the Mount Sinai even says that because of the complexity of the disease, it will exhibit in different issues. And it's not really type 2 diabetes that's the issue, it's the complications thereof, microvascular, macrovascular, that cause you the issues in terms of this. So building on, as you guys are aware, in terms of the basically the data that's available from INPC, and this is with Lilly, Roche, Wiggins Reef, Notre Dame, and in this one I missed it, it's IU in there. My other slides have that correct. We have downloaded type 2 diabetes patients based upon diagnosis codes, medications, and or lab results, so any of those inclusion criterias. We've done a control set. We're looking at the complications that are listed up there in very small type. Roughly about 2 million patients, a little over. Not a huge amount when you talk about genomic sequencing. I mean, when I started looking at this data, very much less than what we have in genomic sequencing. But it is very complex in the different types of data, the error rates, the other type things you have to do to really clean and integrate this data to be able to make what we'd call a research quality data set that then allows you to really drive results. So where are we going in this? Really, basically, Lilly is looking comorbidity subgroups. They really want to try and understand fast, slow progressors, people who are not responding to medications or otherwise, and try and understand the biological basis for that. If you can, then you can do what they have going forward. Obviously, one of them is subgroups and basically machine learning unsupervised in terms of doing this, but also Roche is doing more supervised learning in terms of this, where they actually have validated on this data set a predictive model of what's your probability of getting chronic kidney disease within 3 years of first diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. You can understand why that may be critical as we go forward. If we can understand the hints and predict what people will potentially get, we can change treatment, we can monitor differently, and we can transform healthcare in here. So we're on our way in terms of that. Where are we at now? We're doing a brand new data extract. It gives us access to more of the medications, more modern medications. We have a paper that's ready to go, and we are looking at hopefully doing set on empirical pedigrees because we ultimately want to do patient subgroups and cohort identification from EHR and actually start doing with Indiana Biobank some sample collection from those subgroups. So rather than just in a broad swath, collect biological data, be a very focused strategic way that we collect. We've done a little bit of other work in here, and you can't really see this, but Sankey diagrams looking at disease progression. How do they progress? How fast do they go? How many go into different progressions in terms of this? And then we think that if we can really understand that better, then we can drive understanding. We've got a paper in that has been approved now in terms of looking at other ways with Notre Dame to say how do you do disease understanding driving forward, understand such as heart failure, slow, fast progressors. Why do they? Why do they under certain medications? Again, we are the catalyst for doing this. We're not doing all the work ourselves. In fact, every Friday, the team from Lilly is at IBRI working on the data sets, working on there in a collaboration. Roche is working remotely. So we think this is an opportunity to continue to bring the right people together. And thanks again to Titus as my key partner in that project, because it wouldn't have been able to do it without I still recall my first meetings with Sean and Titus in terms of talking aspirationally what we wanted to do, and it's nice to see it come to fruition and then build on what we can do in the future. So I hope you want sort of say, as we look, and this is my 4-quadrant reduced down, where we started doing projects where we're looking across socioeconomic, we're looking across clinical data and organizationals, and we're doing toxicogenomics, and we're basically doing digital biomarkers. So we're trying to go across the whole spectrum of types of data, working with the right partners, working with them to sort of say, how do we drive these interesting collaborations in ways that drive disease understanding differently. So we're on our way. Can we scale? Can we do more? Can we catalyze more? That becomes a resource strategic priorities. We are just now redoing our strategy in terms of what we want to do as a group, as an organization, building on the successes. We are a startup. We do pivot and continue to change as we go. So we're in the midst of redoing this. It's now different than my 5-year strategy of last year. So go forward. If a strategy only lasts 1 year, the environment's changing pretty fast. But we do think that we can, across these areas, be a place to have access. That's around how do you do it securely with quality and in the right data use agreements and all of the requirements that you have in there. Can we get the access to data? Can we put it in a form that's useful? Can we drive integration platforms? And in places where data doesn't exist now, like digital biomarkers, can we generate data in a quality way? We want to do it as a collaboration hub, the 5 C's that I talked about. We want to be really good at understanding problems and how do you translate nebulous ideas into really tight project plans and business so we can drive forward and go and no-go. And we are, because we work with industrial partners, they always push us in terms of saying, what's your deliverables and are you meeting those on time, on budget, on delivery to get answers to quickly. So almost done. Let me talk about what's going to just happen up the road, and then we'll have time for maybe a question or so. If not, catch me afterwards. 16 Tech, the IBRI's future home. If you haven't heard, there was an announcement just this morning that came out, a press release that the new building, basically they'll show in the next one, Building 1, which was the catalyst for this, of which IBRI will be a tenant. Also, IU School of Medicine will be a tenant for their regenerative medicine and their collaborative efforts. And now CICP and BioCrossroads have shown that they will be in there. This is what's going to happen just north of us. In fact, if you look on this slide, you will see, if I can find my mouse here somewhere. Okay, if you can see right here, this is where we are now. There will be a bridge, an iconic bridge that it connects right to the north. So hopefully right out this road, you'll be able to just walk into the district. The district is planned to be a high-density urban innovation district. Work, live, play. Buildings there for basically the work, the industry, as I talked about, the innovation, but also retail. Restaurants, even a hotel in the future, and housing in terms of this. And so this has been on the target for the Indianapolis now for 10 years to redevelop the site. IBRI actually acted as a catalyst to that, and it will be our home. We will be building number 1 in terms of here. Our hope is you'll see cranes going up in the next month or two. Groundbreaking is next week, so you can see the planned IBRI location. So this will be Wiggins Reef will be a short walk on a nice day from here. So we really look forward to this. Great bridge, great connectivity in terms there. And as I said, we will be in Building 1. That's the first building. It will be lab-based. So difference with IBRI, we do have labs. We are doing biological work, so it's not just data. I'm maybe the difference in terms of there. But we also will have IU School of Medicine. There's talk about IU Informatics. We're building collaborative spaces so people can come there and work there as well if they're in the district and or industrial partners there. And we really, Rob Lyles, who's from Cook Regentech, basically, and the former CEO of IBRI, sort of talk about innovation as a collision sport, right? How do you connect people? How do you get them together? How do you let the ideas go? And so that's what you'll see going up. So at this point, on time, let me just go ahead and stop. So thank you. Probably time for maybe a question, and if not, you can catch me offline. Yeah.
A great question. Just for, if you can zoom in a little bit and describe the Institute as an organization, what's the feature that are different in your organization cluster of human than, let's say, Indiana CTSI, Lilly, Regenstrief? Is it simply yeah, I don't understand the operation.
So yeah, and that's a good question. And what I will say is we get that question all the time. And I will say we think we have an opportunity to be different, to really bridge between organizations, lower the barriers for doing collaborative team science by doing that. Let me just say a couple examples. I didn't talk about this. Lots of times to do some of these collaborations, you need data use agreements where you use basically research agreements, and everyone knows that takes a long time to do. Because we're industry focused, we actually already have sort of, the interest and the organizations to make it successful. My first multi-way collaborative agreement with Lilly and Roche and IBRI took 3 months. My second one took 2 weeks. So if we can build the organizational relationships, if we can build the processes and capabilities to work between, as an independent not-for-profit, we're working with IU, we're also working with Purdue, we're working with Notre Dame. There's an MOU in how we operate. We are part of CTSI. We are part of the organization here. We think we can be a way to actually catalyze and lower the barriers, bureaucratic or otherwise, to really drive some of these projects forward. We want to be a place where people collaborate, come. Sometimes we'll just be a connector. We'll be just a piece to help the environment go. But we think with our applied focus, with our industrial sponsorship, with the way we're networking, with the way we're trying to do the business model different in terms of our foundation and philanthropic funding, we'll be able to drive a different model. But it's complementary to what School of Medicine doing. It's complementary to Wiggins Reef. We hope in the future as we grow, we'll only be maybe 120 people to 200. We will not be successful if we don't engage the whole ecosystem and help the whole ecosystem be more successful. So that's why we keep coming back to the complementary, the 5 Cs. All the leaders who are on our board are top-level leaders of most of these organizations. They're helping guide so that IBRI becomes an asset in addition to all of our other assets here. But I will say that that's why we're redoing our 5-year strategy plan again. We continue as we grow and find those things. We sort of are acting as a more agile organization and shifting a little bit. So what I'd say is that's what I can give you at the moment, but stay tuned. And I'd come back and say, if you have things where we can help, we will always be almost, I would say, sort of behind other organizations, helping other organizations be successful. We have no intent necessarily to be frontline with patients, right? We have no intent to be, we can't commercialize various things. They have to spin them out. We expect, when we deliver success, it'll be adopted by other people in terms of we just want to be a place to lower the barriers, make everyone more successful. Okay, thank you all.